All right, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. And today I'll be discussing a bunch of stuff with regards to the career and mental health specifically. But joining me today is Laura from 50 Mental Health. How you doing, Laura?
Hey, nice to meet you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on and good to connect on here after, connecting through Instagram. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into law enforcement in the first place.
Sure. So, I've been in and around the law enforcement and mental health field for approximately over the last 15 years. I worked in military prison. I worked at a supermax correctional facility, a major hospital in the ED as a social worker, a police officer, and a co-responding clinician. So I've kind of gone
Okay.
like circular in my career from doing all the different things, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you probably have I would imagine, a very unique perspective. I don't think that there's a lot of you that actually served in the uniform side. I mean, you were a CO, military prison, police officer, like all those uniform first responder types, but then also the social worker, co-responder aspect. So that's a lot of hats.
Yeah. So actually when I was in prison, I was actually a therapist in prison. So that was a whole
Okay.
other very interesting dynamic. um
Yeah.
yeah, so I got a few years ago I actually got medically retired as a police officer secondary to some shoulder tore a bunch of stuff in my shoulder, five
Hmm.
shoulder surgeries, a cadaver bone, and that screwed in. And unfortunately, it was something that I didn't want to happen, but I was able to find kind of a position that I was able to stay within law enforcement and mental health, which was felt
Hmm.
really important to me because those are the two things I knew the most about and the two things that I've been the most passionate about. So um, yeah, it's been great. I'm utilized on the Code 99 team in Boston, which is the hostage negotiation barricaded subjects. That's probably one of my
Okay.
favorite parts of the job. And then as well, we're citywide, so we're utilized throughout the city. However, primarily on calls that are suicidal, homicidal, people in acute psychosis, anything that
Yeah.
would uh, maybe need to use a pink slip or involuntary hold, kind of assessing
Hmm.
those situations and problem solving in those moments. Um, I also get to teach some of the stuff for CIT, and I actually recently just got done with another program that was pretty interesting. It was out of William James College, and it was a graduate certificate in crisis response and behavioral health, and it's comprised of all we have six cops and six clinicians, and there's actually two of us that are retired cops. And so it was
Okay.
a lot of like doing some Milo trainings and some ICAT trainings, which is integrating communications assessment and tactics, which was probably one of my favorite parts of the class. But yeah, so it's this I started this business in an effort to really bring mental health and wellness to the forefront of law enforcement. And unfortunately, over the past 15 years, 11 years in the cruiser, I've seen a lot of crazy things. Policing does a lot of reactive things, a lot of
Yeah.
what they deem to be critical, if they do deem it to be critical. Um,
Hmm.
then maybe ask or tell you to go to peer support or go to the stress unit or whatever. I've That's never been the case for me, and I know that it should have been several times. Um,
Mm.
so my goal is to implement wellness checks within departments, especially the smaller departments that don't even have peer support units, and normalize that. That's part of your yearly in service is 1 hour, and you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to talk about the different pillars of wellness and where you're at right now, and the goal is to identify these things throughout the years and not let it sorry and not let it build
You're
up
okay.
until shit hits the fan one year, and then you are taking it out sideways on a family reunion, or you can't face
Hmm.
going to work, or you can't face going home, and you do something terrible to yourself.
Yeah. No, those are all very real things, and we've seen it. Anyone in law enforcement and first responder world has seen it to someone far too close to home, if not within their inner circles. So, um, okay, so I want to rewind a little bit. You hit on a lot of things, but so you're originally a therapist in the prison system, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so your background was that where your
Yep.
schooling was in? Is was it psychology or what
Oh, so
angle
I
did you go
have,
into?
yeah, so my I have a master's and an independent license in social work. And
Okay.
I had that actually before I got on. So it was just so happened that I was able to kind of continue using that once everything else happened.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic background. I mean, we all see that mental health, talking about things like CIT and talking about um, co-responder models, like these are all more contemporary. But any practicing cop has known that these are very critical to know as much as you can about just by doing the job. And so, for you to come in with an actual legitimate background, a legitimate professional background in education, how did that help inform you becoming a new, um, either a new corrections officer or a new police officer?
I mean, I think, the funny part is I think being on the job at this point is everybody kind of has to wear 500 hats anyways, right? Like
Right?
everyone has
Yeah.
to kind of be a social worker anyways. So for
Hmm.
me, I mean, um it wasn't really a hard transition at all. I can't say the academy was too fun. We had a
Yeah.
lot. We have some tough ones over here, but I understand all the things and whatever looking back. But doing the actual job is amazing. I love that, and I love the ways that you get to help people and do all those types of things. So it wasn't a hard transition. And I think also too, coming from different prisons, that it was, you know, already having that and having people, talk a certain type of way to you and do those
Hmm.
things. It was kind of, I was already desensitized from that anyway. So, um,
Sure.
it wasn't really tough. It was actually more rewarding than anything else.
Yeah. What made you want to go into becoming a police officer?
I think well, originally when I got out of grad school, I was gonna, there was an officer program that I was gonna join the army and I was gonna go that route and do all kinds of different things. I ended up not doing that. I think growing up and playing tons of sports, having people in my family, um, in different parts of the military and other stuff like that. I played sports
Hmm.
through college, and then I actually took a break in college and I did AmeriCorps, which I don't know if you know what that is, but the program I was in was the NCCC, which is kind of like a year long like Peace Corps in the United States. So you travel around and do different service projects.
Sure.
So for me,
Okay.
I've always been very like team oriented and like trying to do something bigger than myself and all these things, and then working in prison, and then when I worked in the emergency department in Boston and just saw like time after time after time all these like horrible different cases of people coming into the ED and different things that had happened to them. Um it was just like I wanted to be part of something more than I was doing. I wanted to be part of like
Yeah.
the justice side of it and feel like, all right, like we're going to get something done about this. And it's just, I think it's also just like personality type.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just hearing your resume already, just what you've shared, I'm sure the listeners will be in agreement with me. Just that you're clearly service bound. You're clearly, wanting to be part of something bigger and make your effort be for something impactful, something that makes change, right?
for
And
sure.
so, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm intrigued because you have a mental health background. You come into first responder world and police work, and you said. If I heard you right, you weren't necessarily the one that would go to peer support yourself.
I know. Isn't that messed up? I literally did
Well,
it. I
it's
literally
not bad. It's just a thing. Yeah,
No,
it's
you
totally a
don't.
thing, though,
This
right?
has been an interesting journey actually that I haven't even really discussed and you know, let alone on air, but like really just as of recent that I've started talking about anything about work in therapy, which is
Mm,
funny because like I do have like gone like I have a personal therapist. I see her. She was in the army forever. She speaks 6 languages. She's like a real badass. And I
uh-huh.
love going to her. She challenges me and I don't know, for me it's been yeah, like all these years you just compartmentalize it, right? And you're like, "Oh, it's just like part of the job." But something happened in October. I was at a shooting of a 14-year-old kid. He got hit 3 times in the
Mm,
chest and 2 in the face, and 1 in the eye and 1 in the mandible. And we were talking to him, and he had that agonal breathing. I knew he was gonna
mm-hmm.
die. Um, and it was a 14-year-old and like a 16-year-old. And my partner and I were like the second people there, and everything was fine. You clear the scene, everything was fine. It takes forever. Homicide has to come. Everybody's there. And then when we went
Mm-hmm.
back into the car to send over the body cam footage to homicide because we knew he was going to pass, I was watching it and I felt so sick. It was so weird. Like it was the first time in 11 years that like I just was like I feel terrible about this, like, and I
Mm,
drove home and I cried on the way home, and that was the first time for me too, and it totally freaked me out, because
yeah.
seeing someone or having someone die or whatever, like none of these things were new, um, but that was the first time I ever talked about it in therapy, and I was like, she's like, well, think about all the things you have stacked up in there that you haven't like dealt with. And I'm like, yeah, because you think about it as like this is just part of work, and then, but it totally does. Your work, your uniform doesn't like prohibit things from extending beyond your shift, and same with your personal life. You bring things to work, so of course, right? But it's crazy to me now to think about that. But I guess I never saw those things as like trauma, or I don't know. I didn't feel impacted about it until recently.
Yeah. Well, I think that, regardless of however it breaks down, like you put it well in that we compartmentalize, right? And so and for the listeners, I just really want to focus in on this, like even for a practicing therapist, with all the background, clinical background, education, and then just to say that, you're fine until you're not. And then I think just like, maybe what are your thoughts on not overthinking it? But yeah, like some people might react earlier in their career, like to the first one, and then other people might go, steady stint in their career, like you did, years and years, and not truly feel affected. Maybe not on that physiological level,
Hmm.
but then you just do, right?
Yeah.
And the range is there.
For sure. And I think for me too, that's why I circle back to having, implemented mandated wellness checks, because exactly what you said, and I said this to the Chiefs last week when I met with them. Listen, what's critical to me may not be critical to you. I've gone to a million hangings. Maybe that doesn't bother me, but maybe my best friend's brother just died from an OD and I go to one of those routine ODs and that just hits me the wrong way, right? That's not going to be deemed a critical incident. There's not going to be CISM because of that, but maybe because you're my
Yeah.
partner, that, and you say, "Hey, Laura, listen, you need to go wherever," or um, that's the thing, right? Because since trauma is in the eye of the beholder, everything's gonna
Hmm.
impact all of us differently. And so to me, that's why it's so important to unpack shit as it arises. Whether you come in and you're just talking about, hey, my kid was terrible this week, or my partner was giving me a tough time, or my home life, whatever. It doesn't even have to do with work. Things stack up. So whether it may seem silly to one person or not critical to another, if you're offloading that to an objective third party who's gets the job and is not going to prohibit you from moving up or command staff or anything else like that, we
Hmm.
normalize it and we make it a thing that everybody does and everybody talks about it, and things like that I think are less likely to happen.
Yeah, I love that, and I think normalizing it is key, right? It's for the people in the profession now, and it's for the younger generations coming in, and that's a lot of what I hope is happening with my social media. And I really appreciate you leading by example to say like, hey, I've never said this on the air for sure, but here I am. This is me, and this is me kind of continuing to work out the journey that is how you process these super traumatic things that the average person never sees, only conceptualizes from movies or whatnot. But yeah, we're seeing it week by week, certainly. So, um, yeah, you talk about normalizing and creating this routine mental health visits, having it mandatory, being part of in-service training. I like a lot of that. We've started at my department like a voluntary basis, and in concept, I really like the mandatory, but I'll say I'm hesitant of how officers would react to that. And have you seen that implemented, and what types of reactions, and have you seen in what tends to help officers embrace that?
Yeah, so I'm working with a few departments here to get that going. The hiccup, as I'm sure you know, or not hiccup, but the slow part of the process is the funding, as it always
Mm,
is. Um, However, we've kind of crossed some of those barriers with some of the departments. Um, so here's the problem, right? If you don't make it mandatory from command staff down, you have 70% of people going, and the 30% of people that really need to go aren't going. And
hmm
we've seen that here in, I can't even remember. Well, I wouldn't say the name anyways. I do remember, but I'm not going to say the name. There's
Yeah,
a
no
department
worries.
here that has a higher officer suicide rate per capita than NYPD, which is pretty bad
Oh
because they're
wow.
not that big.
Yeah.
Um, they have a program that is like that. You don't have to go, you can go, and I think they use EAP. Um,
Mm.
the problem is like that's not changing that rate, right? So the guys that really need to go aren't going. So I understand that people may be resistant at first, and that's fine, but people will also remember the
Yeah.
fact that it was never offered to them to begin with.
For sure, and that's something I've heard from numerous officers, either in service or retired. You'll always remember that, right? You'll always remember the resource that wasn't there, and oftentimes it does take some time. Of course, you're talking about normalizing again, right? So you start something new. I think it's only fair to assume some amount of pushback, but fact is, if you have it there, as I'm seeing, a lot of people don't utilize it, or maybe they mean to, but cops are cops. They get busy, and so to take time away to do that when they're either at work and they want to be helpful at work and super swamped with things, and then their time off is so valuable. Why not just make it part of your day? And the only way to get full participation, or even substantial participation, is to make it part of your day, required. So
Exactly. You make it part of your yearly in service. You know that 1 hour of your yearly in service, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be this way for everybody, and that's how it is. You could be a
yeah,
guy that chooses to say nothing the entire time. That's fine. I can deal with that. We'll figure it
yeah.
out. I mean, it's the thing is how many trainings are we going to do on wellness? How many times are we going to talk about it until we actually do something?
hmm Yeah, I like that, and that's what I like to, on anything really police. I like to think about what's your risk and reward, and your risk is of not doing it. We know what that is, right? It's officer suicides, it's officer depression, it's self medicating, it's all
All the
all the
things,
bad
yeah.
stuff, and then yeah, and then your reward, um, of not doing it. I mean, it's not really it's not really there, right? I guess you don't encounter any pushback, but then your risk of doing it, I mean, we know the reward, right? We'll start there. Your reward of doing it is you save lives, and you have people that are optimized, you have people that are happy, positive, productive, right? And or even functioning, if you want to make it about that. And then your risk is that they sit there, as you said, and they just sit there, and that's not a big risk either.
No.
um, they still know that the resource was there, and maybe it takes a few sessions for them to warm up. And just because they sit there with their arms crossed a few times doesn't mean that they'll always, keep their arms crossed and never say anything.
Right. And I think that, a big part of the stigma or the barrier or whatever you want to call it is that not having a culturally competent provider, right? So you take away that
hmm
part by having myself there, who we don't have to you don't have to explain the job. So you're already lessening that anxiety when you bring the person in because they know that they get what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah.
And that alone takes away a lot of that stigma to meeting with someone. A lot of times we're anxious about something, thinking about doing it because we don't know what to expect. But then when you
Yeah.
go in and you're like, oh, this person gets it. Yeah, they've dealt with administrative betrayal. They've dealt with, a line of duty injury. They've dealt with a divorce. They've dealt with whatever. Like, hey,
Hmm.
this we can talk.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so huge when someone's been in the culture, whether they're related closely to some first responders or like yourself. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than someone that actually did the job. And you sound very much like a cop's cop, right? You're not trying to, twist it into some other way. You speak pretty frankly and share your own experience, right? Because a lot of times when that's invited or accepted, like that's huge, right? And it helps make people feel a little bit more comfortable about sharing their stuff.
For sure. And I think having somebody outside your department is key. I think, like I said, peer support is great, but a lot of times people don't want to talk to their peers about stuff. They're still worried about, that getting back out or how they're going to look or whatever else. And a lot of times, if you think about it, when someone, by the time they go to peer support, it has already hit the fan, right? So if
Mm.
you have something along the way, you're ideally going to be able to prevent or work on a lot of these different behaviors or issues that come up. But we're waiting. We're so reactive. Like it kills me.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that makes me think of something that someone shared with me recently. Is that she was trying to build up a peer support program for her department, on your coast, the East Coast, and she actually relayed to me that she was worried that maybe it wouldn't work in the ways that I've seen it work because her department's too small. And although she trusts that there are people that would uh, you know, trust confidentiality, just the fact that it's so small and familial, it's really hard to wrap around this concept that someone could say something and then have it not just be well known. And so that was a very interesting challenge that, as a coming from a mid-sized agency, I definitely didn't feel that level of it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I could
Yeah,
understand her hesitation.
yeah, for sure. And but I love, regardless, I love that she was like building the program and right, like,
Hey,
set an
something is better
example.
than nothing because it's moving in the direction of like getting people to acknowledge things and to talk about things. So 100%, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to go back to too. I really appreciate you bringing up is that a lot of times it's not the most significant thing, right? It's not the officer involved shooting. It's not the fatal wreck where someone's doing life saving events. Maybe it was just a call that might be quote unquote more typical for another officer, but because of what happened in your own life or someone close to you, that could be the triggering event, or that could be the one that really you could have benefited from having CISM. And for outsiders, that's critical incident stress management, like a whole setup debrief. Um, could have been that, but for others, they would be like, why would you have that for suicidal teen that we didn't even
Right.
we just sent him to the hospital and he was fine, but that could be really close to home. So I appreciate you speaking to the relevance of everyone's individual experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And you have no idea, especially, in Boston, it's a big department and I mean, I know the people that I'm normally with, but if I get sent to a different part of the city, I might not know a guy's history or what he's been through or anything else. So,
Hmm.
also depending on your department size or whatever else, it's just we're never going to be aware of all the things that make somebody tick. Even if it's your good friend, they come to work that day, you didn't get a chance to check in yet, but they just had a fallout at their house or they're about to go through a divorce or whatever it is. Maybe they've been drinking too much. um, it's just you just never know what's going to make somebody tick that day. So just allowing them a space and providing that space at work, saying, hey, we give a shit about you. We have this program for you. We're recruiting this way now. We're getting people in here and we want you to live a healthy life. Or, even to the people who are older who are thinking about retirement, how many guys do we know that 6 months after retirement have a heart attack and die because they never took care of
Hmm.
themselves the whole time? Or because of the role loss and everything else, they also decide to take their own life. I've known several of those people as well, where it's so sad. Like, did they think they had nothing else, or was it all the things they had been through, or what was it? So it's like we could be doing so much more along the way. We're just not set yet. And to me, it's like we're set. It's a disservice, really, is what it is. We need to set ourselves up for success.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned these things. The retired cop that kills himself or kills herself. You hear that, and if you're a cop, you know that's not rare. You see it in the news every now and then, so it's enough of a thing to be a significant thing.
Right, but how
Um,
many of those
you know,
things
you
are not documented in the news? I could tell you about several of them. that are not that
sure,
are not
yeah,
that are not written that way because you don't want to write it
hmm
as a suicide because then your family will not receive your pension. However, if it's
yeah,
written a different way, maybe you I won't, we can I know several of those and it's written a different way than as an accident, then your family does get your pension. So it's really sad.
yeah. Yeah, it is super sad, and it's like even the ones where someone suicides on duty. I mean, those would make the news, but then there's a lot of suicide that happens in the course of someone's career that's not ruled in a line of duty death. Yeah, so I think it's just another example of the complicated nature of what you're talking about as far as documentation. But if we operate off the numbers we know, it's significant,
Mhm.
and even the things about just just dying shortly after retirement. I wish I knew the stat. I used to be much more clear on it, but it's just a handful of years, right? Some crazy stat of like how much of
Oh
someone's
yeah,
retirement pension they actually withdraw.
I
Yeah.
posted something about that recently about like the average
Okay.
lifespan of a cop or something, and it's not really many years after retirement. So sad.
No, yeah, the amount that they withdraw from their pension is so low, the average withdrawal. So if you think about, you're working off whatever X number of years, trying to get X percentage,
Yeah.
thinking that you'll be alive for X number of years, and it's just a lot of times on the numbers, it doesn't pan out, and
Hmm.
that's due to a lot of things: stress, trauma, taking care of yourself in all those ways, for sure.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's a lot of negative, kind of doom and gloom, but it speaks to the importance of what we're talking about. Have you thought about what you would say? What are the big things you'd really want to hit home for people considering coming into this line of work?
On the law enforcement side or the mental health side, I mean, I think
Yeah,
all.
let's do law enforcement. Just little tidbits and little nuggets for advice.
Okay. I mean, oh, there's so many, right?
Yeah,
don't, don't make details in overtime. Only go off your base pay for what you can afford. Um,
yeah,
don't don't do those. Don't be that guy that buys like a brand new truck 2 years in because you've just worked yourself to death.
hmm
Have some type of education or a fallback or something. So God forbid if something happens to you like it did to me and you're forced into a medical retirement, you have a secondary career. Um,
yeah.
uh, I do
That's
receive
good.
I do receive my pension, so it's not like I don't have anything. But the way it is in Massachusetts, PARAC is the board that governs that, so you can only make a certain amount of money on top of that. But
Okay.
I don't know, like depending on what someone. There's a lot of people who are cadets here. They start to become a cadet at like 19 or whatever, and then they get on later and they don't have any other type of education, and so I always tell them like if listen if all else fails for you, like you're not what are you going to do, have another plan
hmm
for something else because not everybody makes it. The For us it's 32 years. I think it's less for you guys. um
You just got to get to 53, so depends when you start for a full pension.
oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So have something else. Definitely don't do what we all do, which is wait to talk to somebody along the way about your things that bother you because you might not think you might think you're fine now and then later you realize you're not fine, so don't do that.
yeah,
And
love that.
just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's what my favorite drill instructor always said to me, and I try to live that way in general, but especially in policing, like do that job for the right reasons, and it will be rewarding to you, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to highlight the fact that I'm talking to a therapist, someone with mental health training, and now practicing in that. You had a solid law enforcement career that unfortunately ended, but when talking to new officers, like the audience, you're talking about finances and you're talking about backup plans, and I think that the main takeaway for me is just that recognition that hey, all these things are deeply intertwined with your livelihood and your mental health. If you overburden yourself relying on your overtime check, then yes, life will get stickier and more cumbersome for you, and your health and your stress is going to be way different than if you just lived under your means. Same thing with education, right? I think that the ability to have some degree of free agency, whether that's between organizations or just your specialties, like whether you're applying yourself and challenging yourself to learn new things, so you're not stuck and you never truly feel stuck. I think that's highly impactful too for just navigating a career or a life more healthfully.
Yeah, and for us, different places have different education incentives. So, like, if you have your bachelor's, you get 20%. If you have a master's, 25. If you have associates, it's 10. So I don't know if you guys have stuff like that, but
That's huge.
yeah,
We have like 4 and 6%, which is actually pretty good for our region.
yeah.
I mean, we have pretty good base pay out here, which is good. But that's awesome to hear those incentives are truly valued. I mean, they show that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're working and you have, you're sitting next to your partner and you know he's making way more than you by doing the exact same thing, I mean, that's got to be some type of motivation. If you can, not everybody has the drive and wants to do it or has the means or whatever, but usually you can find different look into different law enforcement scholarships and stuff like that. I just did this graduate certificate year long program and it was free. So I mean, there's tons of different avenues to get your needs met if those are things that you're interested in. But I totally agree. Have something to fall back on and have something where like you feel like you can make decisions if you want to and if you need to, and it's not all just based on what your department decides for you.
Yeah, that's huge. And yeah, a lot of cities have some form of tuition reimbursement. Ours will cover, as long as it's pre-approved and aligned with your career, which just about anything can be in law enforcement. That's kind of the beautiful thing. Yeah, it covers just about everything, I think, and then a portion of books even. So yeah, look at your policies, look at what your department, your city offers, and then yeah, other organizations like you just mentioned. That's fantastic that there's resources like that. I'm sure a lot of them are relatively untapped. So my next question was going to be, kind of advice for your active cop, and I think that a lot of the things you said are still easily applied to someone that's been in for a few years or many years. It's just like, hey, if these things aren't or haven't been addressed or kept in mind, then maybe there's opportunity to do that.
I think, yeah, that, and also, if you're somebody who's been on, don't be the guy who's been on and defaults back to, well, I had to deal with this type of stuff, so you have to deal with that type of stuff. Be the type of guy that's willing to ask somebody how they're doing, or be observant enough to check in on your teammates, on your squad, and see how things are going. I mean, it's we work with a whole different variety of people with different mentalities and with different acceptance of anything that has to do with mental health. So don't
Hmm.
be the guy on your shift that needs to try to be, a badass when it comes to that, because it's not the way. It's not what we're doing anymore. It's not helping anybody. It's not serving anybody. Um, be the guy that people can talk to. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I love that. And then if you are that veteran officer or your supervisor or just, you just have that organizational, unofficial, informal trust and leadership. If you feel comfortable being a little vulnerable, just throw out those nuggets because, man, it can carry so much weight. There was a pretty senior sergeant that when we started doing a version of these voluntary, I mean, basically for a little bit we were doing these. Quarterly SISM, kind of like a quarterly debrief for the crew, just to kind of encapsulate, hey, you've been to a lot of shootings, a lot of homicides, a lot of wrecks, and a lot of things with kids and all that. And it might not be worth doing one, for everyone and not feasible. But let's just talk as a crew, like what's going through your minds and what was challenging.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the senior sergeants, after we rolled that out, he said pretty candidly at the end of it, he's like, you know what, this I wish we had more of this stuff through my whole career. We need more of it. Um, and even though it was perceived, by some that was just a big vent session because it was the first one ever. I think it says a lot. I think it says a lot that someone feels comfortable to vent. It shows it's a safe space, right? It shows that you are given the mic and someone cares what you have to say. Um, and so, yeah, I love that he was able to share that. And then similarly, another officer really close to retirement one time just kind of said, hey, I'm comfortable saying this. We didn't have a lot of discussions on things like this. We didn't have a lot of resources, um, at least front and center or socialized. And I think it would have made a big difference. I think it might have saved me, a divorce or two.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pretty candid in that. He was kind of joking, but at the same time, he brought it up in this point to say, hey, like things could be different, and like that doesn't have to be scary, and let's embrace those resources.
Yeah. It all, all this stuff that we're talking about too, I think I know is reinforced by command staff. So if the command staff sees the use and understands what we're trying to accomplish here, I think it makes life way easier because we can have 15 guys on patrol who are all about it. But if command staff isn't willing to do anything about it, it's hard to make those changes. One of the chiefs that kind of got me into these different meetings, she was introducing me at this one last week, and she said, I brought Laura here because what I want to leave as my legacy as a chief is officer wellness. And I want
Mm,
people to know that I care about them and that I want them here and I want them to, have a healthy career and a healthy life. And, she sees it, she gets it. So I think
hmm
it would be great, having more of that, having more people like that would be amazing. And I think we're working towards that.
Yeah, that's great because that's kind of where my question was trending is what would you say to administrators, because they are the shot callers, they're the decision makers on things, right? It's policy, it's money, and so I'm glad it was perfect that you brought up her example, saying, hey, this is a priority for me.
Yep.
I want this to be legacy. I want this to change for the better. Um, do you feel like that was well received and well heard by the troops?
I do. So for that meeting, it was a Chiefs meeting, so it was only all Chiefs there.
Ah, yeah.
And it was she's now gotten me into two of their different monthly meetings. One was about 50 and this one was about 100 chiefs, and
Mm,
I got to have some really good conversations with some of them. I garnered some more interest. I know a lot of their budgets come out in July, so I have conversations scheduled for then.
mm,
My thing to them that I said was, I a boss is somebody who makes everyone feel watched, and a leader makes everyone feel seen. So I
mm,
think that part of, really seeing your people is hearing them and listening. I asked them, I said, please go. I'm not a huge social media person. I'm working really hard to be one, but go to this
yeah.
page, see the things that people are saying. Now imagine all the messages I'm getting on the side. Like Massachusetts alone, I've already gotten at least over 10 people into just individual therapists, um,
Yeah.
officers. So people want it, people need it, people are asking for it. I think as
Mm,
administrators, like we're worried about retention, we're worried about recruitment. Well, do something about it, make a change. You can't keep doing the same things and expect things to be different, right? The things we're doing to change are like lowering standards for fitness, which is ridiculous. The
mm-hmm.
things we should be doing is enhancing other areas such as wellness and mental health. Show people right off the bat from recruiting to the academy to when they get in that you care about them and that you care about their mental health, you care about their family life situation and everything else going on, and let that continue throughout their careers. I opened with these chiefs and I said, I have a couple questions. I'd be happy if people wanted to participate, but if you feel like you'd rather keep the answers to yourself, that's fine. And my first question was, how many people in their law enforcement career have contemplated suicide? And, this is a room full of chiefs, so no one raised their hand. And then the second
Mhm.
question was, how many people in their law enforcement career have had a brother or sister officer commit suicide? Almost everyone raised their hand.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went down a list, like, depression, substance abuse. We have injuries all the time. We have this, we have that, whatever. And I ended up circling back to that, kind of saying, talking about peer support and talking about, um, you know, having a clinician check in and that type of thing. And I said, I would guarantee you there's several people in here who have contemplated suicide at some point in their career, but nobody is gonna say that. And I said, and
Yeah.
nobody's gonna say that. I bet you, unless it's like, they're really hanging on by their last like toenail, no one's gonna say that in peer support either. That has to be to an
Mhm.
objective person. So I think, I was a little provocative in some ways to try to get through to them, but I had a bunch of chiefs talk to me afterwards and set up different things. So I'm confident that at least over here we're moving in the right direction. But ultimately, like you said, it's command staff that need to really implement those changes. And I made it clear to them. I said, the only thing the department gets back would be a list of participants. They don't get any notes. They don't get anything else from me.
Yep.
That would all fall under, private health information and HIPAA and everything else. So,
Yeah, that's huge.
and I said everyone would be expected to participate. Because a couple of years ago, my lieutenant, who'd been on for 28 years, hanged himself. His own guys had
Mm,
to cut him down. It does. It's
man.
like this stuff does not discriminate based on rank. So I mean, we all need to be in there. We all need to be getting stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I'm kind of in that phase of my career where a lot of my peers or friends, like some of my closest friends are command staff at different agencies now. And so I can empathize as a sergeant, I can empathize and say, hey, like sometimes they feel so removed, right? Because they feel like they're quote unquote the man and they want to do more, but they're painted, pretty broadly, just like officers sometimes are painted by admin in certain ways, right? And so it's just I guess it's a discussion of empathy where they can really feel alone and they can really feel an island, especially they're trying to do the right thing, for their guys, but not feel like it's being seen. And sometimes it's not about that to be a leader, but just to say, I know it's challenging for some,
Sure.
certainly. And you don't have that camaraderie. Like, I mean, I went to specialty units just a little stint ago, and I don't have that camaraderie going to briefing or a roll call with my quote unquote guys, where we go to stuff together and we come home together. I don't have that. It's a little different when you're working a desk. So I do miss a lot of that, but I could see how quickly someone can feel pretty siloed or alone.
Sure.
Um, but I love that you reinforce the command, and I'm confident there are a lot of awesome up and coming or already established police leaders that are gonna raise the bar and raise the standard and the support for mental health. But I'm sure that there are many that roll their eyes, and so this is my challenge to, those police leaders out there, those up and comers, saying, "Hey, you might be eye rolled at when you make a stand in a room, and you say what you say, and you mean what you say, and you do something that reflects what you say, right? But pretty soon that generation is going to be retired out, and it's going to be you leading the charge.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this message also goes to those line cops saying, hey, recognize that you can finger point and say, hey, my command doesn't do XYZ, and cross your arms, or you can say, hey, I'm going to do everything I can at my level. I'm going to work with our union potentially, or look at other resources. And one day, you play your cards right and you stay engaged in the right way, then yeah, you will be in those positions of more influence. And so certainly you can do that.
Yeah, for sure. I
Man,
didn't really expect that my everything would land where it did, but I think that there's everything happens the way that it needs to happen. And, ideally
yeah,
in the police world, things take time. Things take a lot of time, but, that's just
yeah,
how it is. And I'm lucky enough to have a lot of connections and resources and networking. So I really do see, although, sometimes I feel frustrated by the slow progress, there's definitely progress. So we'll get there, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I have to be reminded of that. Oftentimes I feel like a realist, but one of my bosses, calls me an idealist. So I'll I'll take the compliment side of that.
Sure.
But yeah, I get really excited about things, and I'm like, man, why we can pivot, we can move quicker. But you're right, man. It's government and it's police, so the bureaucracy is real at
Yeah,
times, and doesn't mean give up. It just means be patient and do the little you can at a time.
for sure. Yep.
Man, Laura, I really appreciate. We covered a lot of ground. You're a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I know that there are others fighting the good fight. It's really comforting. I think as much as I hate social media at times, leaning in and working more on this whole blue grit project's been very encouraging and inspirational to me because I can interact with other police professionals and just wellness professionals from across the country that are, or even Canada, because I talked to a couple guys up there recently. But um, just to say that, yeah, we're not alone in this, and there's certainly a lot of people that are doing the work quieter than you or I too, and so stay patient, stay engaged. Where can folks find you and get in contact with you or find out more about the work you're doing, Laura?
Sure. So I think, well, definitely I'm the most active on Instagram. So at 5-O mental health. Um, and then if you want to email me, it's Laura at 50mentalhealth.com. And the website is 50mentalhealth.com. But probably the most active place would be Instagram. I also have a LinkedIn, but honestly, it's like you said, it's social media there's a lot going on, and I don't have enough time to do all those
Yeah,
things. So
it's a lot.
the primary thing that I'm active on is and trying to be consistent with is the Instagram. But yeah, if
Yeah,
anybody
that's
has
great.
any questions or needs to be connected to any resources, that's another big part of the Instagram for me is connecting people with resources across the country. I just had somebody reach out from Argentina. Um,
Mm.
making different connections and also getting different, quotes from people, which you better send me one soon. And amount of time on, and well,
I thought I did.
everybody's anonymous. Did you? I have to go back and
I
check.
thought I
I
did.
don't know anymore.
I'll double check
I'm
here.
running low, so I need people that because the point is, right, like we're connected through these different things, and I want people to
Yeah.
continuously feel supported and connected, and we hear these different things from other people, and sometimes it can help shift your perspective in a way that you didn't necessarily realize you needed.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, those are the ways to connect, and I'm always happy to help uh, get people into places if they need to or find the right people for them.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, so the different connections, it's like the number 5-0, and then I'll have that listed in the show notes for when this goes live too. So you can click and scroll down, take a look at that. But yeah, any closing remarks, Laura, before we sign off?
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And nope, just everybody keep doing good work, keep looking out for each other, and like I said, do the right thing.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, Laura. And to all the listeners, please share this message. Please share this episode. Clearly, this is a conversation that needs to be continuing, and we need to build on it. So please share it out with all your circles, and so we can hear more from professionals like Laura that know better than I. Especially in the nitty gritty of how police work and mental health and wellness and everything all intersect. So again, take care and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Bye bye.
Bye.